Hi there, I'm going to be showing you how to use the Folded Corner Clipper XL ruler from Creative Grids. It's yet another awesome ruler from Creative Grids and covers all sorts of different blocks. This is the extra large ruler from the Folded Corner Clipper series. There is also a smaller one. This large ruler is used for adding corner units onto all sorts of different blocks. The ruler has markings from 1 inch up to 10 inch. So you can see it covers a wide range of sizes of units. The smaller ruler uses will only go up to a 5-inch block. So this is a good one to go with because it gives you lots and lots of options. As with all the other Creative Grids rulers, this comes with a great sheet of instructions. And you can see on there the different types of units that it will make. They're all shown here. So lots and lots of different purposes. The Creative Grids rulers have a great grippy system on the back that lets you slide the ruler around when you're positioning it. But when you put pressure on the ruler, those grippy circles will adhere to your fabric to some degree and just prevent so much slippage. So they're really useful. So as I said, this is a ruler that uses that you use to put corner units on. So in this case, I'm wanting to add an extra triangle to the end of this rectangle. So this is what I'm aiming to produce. So usually when you're doing a unit like this, you're going to position your square on top of your rectangle, and then you're going to draw a line point to point, which will become your stitching line. You stitch across there, and then you trim the unit a 1/4 inch away from your stitching. With the corner clipper, you don't have to do any marking. So I'm going to take the markings here that correspond with the size of my rectangle. This is a 5-inch rectangle, so I'm lining up that 5-inch line across the bottom of my square. Line up with the edge of the ruler with the top of the rectangle, and then I've got a little mark down at the side here that lets me position that accurately at the corner. And I am going to cut off that corner piece. I'm going to clip the corner before I do any sewing. So I clip the corner, and I'll show you how that works out. So here is a unit that I've already stitched, and I have trimmed that before I did the stitching. And then when I press that open, then I have a perfect rectangle, but with the extra color added in the corner. So that's the first thing we can do. When you take 2 squares like this and use your clipper to mark them, that allows you to sew half square triangles quickly and easily. So that's second usage. A third type of block that we can make is, in this case, it's an elongated snowball block. If that was a square in the center there, I'd have a perfect snowball block. But I'm adding colors to each of my corners. So to produce that, I'm going to take my rectangle of fabric, and I'm going to be adding a block in the corner. So for this unit, this is a 2.5-inch square. So I'm going to line up my 2.5-inch line with the bottom of my square. I've got my little mark at the side there to help me get that straight, and I line up the top of the ruler, and I'm going to trim off that corner. So when I do that, this is the other way up, but it's okay. When I trim off the corner and then I stitch along that line, press that out, that gives me my first corner unit. And as you saw in the first image of this type of unit, when I do all 4 corners, then I get this great elongated hexagon with the snowball corners. And depending on the shape you've got in the center there, you're going to have a square snowball block or a block like this. So that is another awesome use. This is one of those rulers that just keeps on giving. The next thing we can use it for is to produce binding strips ready for sewing together. So typically when you're doing your binding, you're sewing them like this. You draw a line corner to corner, you trim, and then you end up with the second strip of binding attached together. When you're using the corner clipper for making your binding, I'm going to be stacking up my strips of binding 2.5 or 2 1/4, whatever you prefer. Stack them up, all of them right sides facing up. And then I'm going to take my ruler, and I'm making sure I'm still in the camera range, and I am. Then you're going to, again, mark this just like you marked the last one, this at 2.5 here. There we go. And I'm going to line it up top, line up my line along the bottom, and my little angle line right at the edge there, and trim off that corner. So once I've done that, I end up with 2 strips of fabric. These have been done together, and you don't have to do just 2 at a time. You can stack up as many strips as you can handle and trim them all at the same time. So I end up with my strips like that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this one to put them perpendicular to one another. Because my corners are trimmed off, I've got my nice engineered corners there, no dog ears. And then I'm just going to stitch along 1/4 inch away from that line. And you will see when I turn that out, these are going to be sewn together, and you will end up with a continuous strip of binding, just like this. And it comes out absolutely perfectly because you've got the dog ears removed. So everything just runs smoothly together. And if you cut all your strips of binding at once, you just keep on sewing those. You can chain piece them and get all your binding done lickety split. In a similar manner to this, you can also do mitered corners. So if you want to do a miter to add a border on your quilt, or make attic windows, anything like that, I'm going to take my fabric. This is going to be my top border for my quilt, and you can see that there. And I'm going to line those up right sides together. So this is awesome for all kinds of borders because you can actually use this to cut up to 10 inches. So even if you have a really big border, you can still do the miter. Now, this piece of fabric here is 5 inches, so I'm going to line up my bottom 5-inch line up my angle piece at the end, and my engineered corner at the top, and I'm going to take off that corner. This is right sides together. Okay, so once I've done that, you end up, got a few fuzzies on here, you will end up with an angled cut. You've done just like this, trim that off, and now you open up your fabric. This is the top piece of my quilt. So you can see that, and make sure I'm in the screen there. Yes, I am. So you can see I've got the angled cut at this end, and I've got an angled cut way down at the other end off the camera. When I do that a second time, I cut another piece. So I've got my angled line again and open that up. And this gives me the side piece. And then when I lay those two guys together, not perpendicularly, one on top of the other, and I'm going to stitch across here, 1/4 inch away from my cut. And when I press that, I've got that perfect mitered corner. So and that's the same, you'll do the same thing on each of the corners to get your beautiful mitered border. So another wow cut from the folded corner clipper. And the last thing I'm going to show you is creating half hexis. So in this case, I'm going to take a strip, it's 2.5 inches wide, and I believe that's 6.5 inches long. And I'm going to stack up a number of strips like that, and then use my ruler to trim off the corner, just in the same way that I make the mitered corners or do the binding. So I'm going to take that strip off, and then I'm going to turn my ruler and use it to take off the corner at the other end as well. So on both, you'll have a big stack of strips, and you're going to take off both ends. So you end up with a bunch of strips that look like this. When I take those strips and I turn this perpendicular and trim that and sew it, I'm going to end up with a seam that looks like that. And when you sew a whole bunch of these together, you can see I produce a long strip of half hexis, which you can either you can join them together in any way you want for all sorts of different projects, but it also makes a great sashing or border. So lots and lots of uses for the Folded Corner Clipper XL. This is a ruler that does so much, you won't want to be without one in your arsenal.